For today's tech stack and Thursday, and this is a training that will actually be being sent out to everyone because it involves changes and updates to the listing process. We are going to take a look at some forms that have come about as a result of NAR making some additional agreements and updates to how marketing is handled based on um, ongoing litigation, as well as defining clearly what can and can't go on with third party vendors. Now, keep in mind, one of the largest forces driving this is Zillow. Uh, Zillow being the largest third party vendor that provides access to information about listings on their platform. Second largest being Redfin. So the changes we're going to look at are the result of ongoing interaction between the Redfin, Zillow, and the NAR, the National Association of Realtors, and then how that affects the MLS, the local listings. Zillow has updated their policy as to whether or not they will include a listing on their platform. It's evolved over time. These standards now exist because they claim that their goal is simple, is to ensure that every buyer has fair access to listings. We'll overlook the current litigation between the Department of Justice and Zillow and Redfin for manipulating the rental market, and we'll just stick with their claim that they're trying to provide fair access to everyone. That said, when you create a listing, it has to remain active and available on an IDX or VOW. Those are technical terms for the secondary listing market when the listing goes live. The MLS is currently set up for that to be the setting. The default has been that makes that available. When you create a listing now and you're going through this process, you'll now see that you can manually select some additional options. Zillow listing requires that you allow them to share beyond your own clients, but as soon as they catch any information or any inclination or proof that you have already marketed the property prior to putting it on the MLS, Zillow will pull it from their site and it will no longer be available on Zillow. If that means we put it on just the brokerage website before we put it on the MLS, Zillow will pull it and make it no longer available. If you've done any kind of traditional marketing, such as a sign in the yard or sharing in listings through emails or networks or private networks, Zillow will pull it from the listing. There are markets that have been developing their own private networks to share information, including potentially information about compensation, but that's that's a lawsuit for another day. And social media posts, if they find that you've done any kind of social media posts about coming soon, and it includes any kind of address and price and call to action, they will pull the listing from their site and it will no longer be on Zillow. And if you're familiar with looking at list track data, list track on the MLS tracks the MLS, Zillow, Trulia as the three most common ways that nationwide people are seeing the property. So if you want your property on Zillow and want people to see it, then we've got to make sure that we're compliant that way. In order to fit this, along with some other national and requirements that the NAR has been working through, when you go in to create a listing, there are now some additional listing forms. We've gone over the MLS exclusion form before. This is the one that we recommend you use when you're taking a listing. If it's not immediately within 24 hours going on the MLS, use this form. And then the seller option is the most commonly used is do not submit until the listing is publicly marketed. This is actually currently provided in listing packets. This form is submitted online. Prior to hitting submit, we recommend you Control P, print, and save it as a PDF so you have proof that it's been filed. We also have a copy of it in broker mint that can be signed at the time of the listing, but it still has to be manually entered within 24 hours. Actually, it's 5 business days of you getting the listing, but the sooner you do it, the less likely you are to get in trouble. That's the first form. That's the one that's been around the longest. The second is if you are changing brokerages and transferring listings. We're not going to touch that one today. That's a separate issue. Listing input permissions, that is where you provide permissions for others in the office to work with your listing. Mark is your transaction coordinator. If Ashley is your transaction coordinator, um, a member of the brokerage, we're not going to touch those today. That's a separate issue. Okay, property photo opt-out. This is a notice to the MLS that the property owner has opted out of having any photos of the property on the MLS. And you notice you've only got a 2-day deadline. So in other words, if you're working on the listing and getting it ready and you're filling out that MLS exclusion form and your sellers have opted out of any photos online, I would say do this at exactly the same time so that both are on the MLS's record. This is a very, very, very infrequently used form. Because for most buyers, if they look at a listing and there are no pictures, the first question that runs through a buyer's head is, what really is the condition of that property? These tends to be investor specials where the condition of the property is such that it's not even being marketed to the general public. It's just being marketed to someone who's looking for a home to fix and flip, and they'll deal with going and seeing it on their own. Now, the next MLS form. This is new. Listing internet display or address display opt-out form. Your sellers can opt out of being put on Zillow and Redfin and those other third-party internet displays. It's their personal choice. They need to understand that that is a major part of marketing in the modern world. They need to understand that by doing this, the only place that this will be publicly viewed would be on the MLS, but that is their choice. If they are choosing to opt out, purpose of this form is to provide a mechanism whereby the seller can notify their listing brokerage that the seller does not want their listed on the internet or does not want the address of their property to be displayed on the internet. There are two options to this. They can either opt out of the entire property or they can simply opt out of having the address of the property placed there. Even though the seller may opt out of the internet display or opt out of having the property address on the seller's property will be displayed within the MLS and the listing and listing address will still be visible. So what this is telling them is what this is excluding it from. These instructions provided within this form only apply to IDX websites. Our website, where someone comes in and searches for properties on primerealestate.com, that's an IDX website. VOW websites and syndicated websites are other websites like Redfin, Zillow, that take information from the MLS and put it on their website. Syndication websites, we occasionally we'll post something on, if you want to push something on KSL or on Craigslist, other types of websites that you manually are entering the information and marketing it, and UtahRealEstate.com's public-facing website. In other words, you have to remember there are two versions of UtahRealEstate.com. There's what the public sees, and there's what we see as agents. But if they take it off the public website, then that means essentially no one's seeing it. It's no longer on any of the platforms that people are searching. Okay. They can choose. I have advised my listing brokerage, I do not want my listed property to be displayed on the internet. That means they've now eliminated all internet-facing marketing. all of it. Property won't be there at all. Or they don't want the address to be displayed on the internet. Now, for privacy and security reasons, there may be an occasional seller that, because of their privacy or their situation, may choose they don't want their address out in front of everybody. But it becomes much more difficult to sell a property when people don't know where it is, what the address is. And it must be signed and must be retained by the brokerage. Now, this is and so if they're going to use this, they're opting out. Make sure this is signed. Make sure it's in the file in broker mint, because this is the written proof that we're going to use for opting them out on the listing. Because once you go in to create the listing, there are now tabs to mark yes or no if they are opting out. It's not on a listing input form, it's here. Third-party comments and estimated values. Without saying Zillow outright, because there are other ones that do the same as well, there are websites like Zillow, like Redfin, that when they publish the listing, they also publish their estimated value of the home. So if you've done your market research and you know the home and you've made the adjustments based on the actual market and you estimate the home and you go in and you do the presentation with your seller and say, look, this is what the market is showing about your home. We could list this for 750,000 because of these adjustments for your view, for your upgrades, for the pool in the backyard, all that kind of anything, all those adjustments we make on a market analysis that Zillow doesn't have access to, or Zillow's algorithm won't know about. Zillow is just going to take all the sales data from around it, and you can say, look, based on your home, on what we know about your home, it's at 750. Zillow could come up and say, we only think it's worth 700, or whatever their value is, without making any of those kinds of adjustments that do actually enhance or could negatively impact value. And so sometimes, so that's what they're doing on their end. They also, some third-party sites also allow others who have viewed it to write comments about the property that become publicly the public can view and read. Like, after a showing, somebody writes a review of the property that you don't know about or have control over. They can opt in or opt out of having those. The undersigned sellers hereby instructs the listing brokerage or sales agent to notify the MLS that the seller has elected to disable or discontinue the following features. So when you go into create listings now, you'll see that there is a tab that you turn on or turn off for public estimates of value, public comments, third-party comments. Again, get this signed, keep it with the brokerage. So when you go in to create the listing, you're just going to be turning a tab on or off. This is your physical documentation that you've now added this to the conversations you're having with sellers. Now, the last one is if they're doing a limited marketing. Purpose of this form is to provide a mechanism whereby a seller can notify the listing brokerage or sales agent that the seller has decided to have their listing classified as limited marketing on the UtahRealEstate.com or MLS. Limited marketing is listed for sale, and that is accessible to other real estate professionals and their respective clients through the MLS. However, at the direction of the seller, the limited marketing listing will be delayed or limited from public marketing. In other words, you can delay when it goes out to those third parties. But as we just looked at with Zillow, if you delay it more than one day, Zillow won't pick it up. So the delay really is going to depend on if you delay. If they say, well, look, I don't want Zillow and Trulia and those other accounts to see it for a week, Zillow and Trulia may not actually pick it up in the end of that week because it was not publicly marketed on day one. That will limit overall access to seeing the property. And again, this is signed, maintained at the brokerage, and that's a toggle switch on or off with the MLS as you create the listing. So these forms now, if you're going to go meet with somebody for a listing, make sure you've got the listing internet display or address display opt-out, third-party comments and automated value estimates opt-out, and seller notice to classify listing as limited marketing. Okay. Even if they wanted on all of those, they're not opting out. We need to make sure they understand that that is now a market option. And if they mark, put it everywhere, great. We can put it everywhere, but make sure you have those list properties in there, these forms in there. Now, if you're going to update a listing, if you're going to make changes to it, same thing. Make sure you have them. So make sure you have these in listing packets, and then we'll work with Michael and our team here to make sure that these get put into, the paper packets, but also get added to your seller checklist, because these have to be signed by the seller. Yes or no, am I going to do this or not? So that we've got proof that we had that conversation with our client about what these changes are. Now, as always, if you have questions, call me, send an email, send a text. We'll go over this. What we didn't do is go in to create a fake listing to show you where it is, because that, the MLS is quirky that way. But you will see now when you get to that very last screen where it asks about third parties and BOWs and IDXs and whatever else, yes or no, yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. Do you want it on public? Do you not? Do you want third party comments? Do you not? Do you want third party valuation? Do you not? Do you want to delay it? Yes or no? Or how long? This is the paperwork for that.